Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last session of Bill Badke's Teaching Research Processes. That has been a six-part series this summer of 2021 that has been designed to help our faculty grow in the way we engage students in research processes. Luigi, would you open us in prayer?
Okay, Doctor. Very good. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost, who was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so very much, Luigi.
Thank you, Doctor. Keep in touch.
With that, I'll introduce Bill Badke for the last time in this series, and hopefully we'll have him back sometime later in another series, which I think would be a great gift to our community. It has been so far. Bill Badke is the assistant librarian at Trinity Western University in Canada, which makes this experience that we've had with him this term a truly international endeavor. With that, Bill, take it away.
Great. Well, this is the last session, and it kind of wraps things up. I'd like to ask a question just for your own reflection. Have you ever attended a retreat or a conference or some other kind of concentrated gathering? You had a wonderful experience. It was a transformative experience. You just felt like your life had entered a new era, that things were different now, that everything was going to be wonderful. And so you leave whatever the gathering was, and a few days pass, and reality starts to set in. And you start to realize that you still have the same old problems that you're dealing with in your own lives, and some of the challenges that are still there, and you're trying to figure out, how can I take this wonderful experience I have and really make it transformative? And as time passes, less and less of whatever was transformative about that experience seems to stick. And eventually you realize that you're back in the same old world, and that while you may have gained some insights, they really haven't taken hold and transformed your life. And that's the kind of fear I have as we go through a set of workshops like this, that something that could really transform the way we think about our teaching and learning of students could be lost. And so I'd like to spend the last session looking at how do we promote this thing? How do we make sure that we do overcome the challenges that are there and really have this be transformative for our life and our teaching? And so I'm going to take a look at a number of, first of all, of paths of resistance that we have to overcome. As I've worked with faculty, I've realized that even when they are pretty much on board with teaching research processes, as I've outlined in the previous modules, there are still some things that hang in there and really cause them to wonder whether they're actually going to be able to do this or not. And so I'd like to suggest 4 things that are potential barriers, and then see what we can do to overcome them. The first one is this feeling, I know what I'm doing, and here I've got this outside person telling me in some way how to run my class, how to do my course. And I'm naturally resistant to that because professors are supposed to be autonomous in the classroom. They're supposed to be able to determine the pattern that they follow and the kinds of things that they're doing. And I'm not really sure I want to make a change. It's been going along pretty well. It's not perfect, but it's working. And to make a transformation is really not the thing that I want to do. A second one is I have to cover the material one. And I experienced this a few months ago. I was working with a nursing faculty, and you may not know that in the field of nursing studies, everything is evidence-based. They are very high on students learning how to do research, how to be able to gather evidence to support their practice. Evidence-based right through the nursing field is very, very strong. So she knew very well that her students needed to have the skills to be able to do evidence-based work. But she lamented about the fact that she had so much material to cover, so many things that students had to learn. And, having been in the hospital recently, I know how much students need to know. And that seems to be a real struggle. How do you cover the material and yet teach research processes along the way? A third one, I'm not a research instructor. I ran into that this past weekend. I bumped into one of my fellow faculty at our seminary, and we were, kind of recounting how the summer had gone. And I told him that I was doing this series of workshops, and he said, we really need to do something like that here. He said, I know what I want students to do, but I really am not sure how to actually get students to do it. I'm not sure about the language to use to enable them to understand what it is I'm looking for. I know what I'm looking for, but I'm really not a research instructor. And just to explain to students, this is what they're supposed to be doing is difficult for me. And he suggested that maybe I should do a series of workshops with faculty, just like I've done with you folks, because he really felt like this was not a field that he was very strong in. The grand irony of that is that about 20 years ago, he actually took my research course as a seminary student in our seminary. And so it was a little disappointing. And the final one, I don't really want to disrupt what I'm doing now. I don't want to upset the apple cart. It's too much work to transform everything I'm doing and start over. I can remember the days when I first started teaching and the long nights I spent preparing and trying to get things up to date. And I was always like 2 classes ahead of my students, struggling desperately to get a course together and have it make sense. And now to have to do that all again and disrupt what I'm doing just doesn't seem like something I want to do. And you may think of some other possible objections, but those are the ones that I hear most often. First of all, the I know what I'm doing problem is often a blow-off. It's the kind of thing where, I talk to a faculty member and, suggest that there might be some ways I could help them, improve student research. And their response is, it's my class, and I've been doing this a long time, and I think I know what I'm doing, and it's going pretty well. I really, if you want to come in and spend an hour with the students showing them how to use the database, it's fine. But this whole idea of doing all this work to teach student research, it's not what I do. It's not the kind of course I'm teaching. And it's my course. They might not say it's my course, but you can feel it in the air. It's my course. And I don't want you telling me what to do. And my response to that is, yes, but what about your students and their abilities? We're looking at this from the standpoint of, it's my class and I know what I'm doing and results are pretty good. But what about the students? We know their research projects are weak. You ask any faculty member, even at graduate level, how well students are doing with student research, and you generally find that it's pretty weak. It really doesn't meet the kinds of goals that you have as a faculty member, and it certainly doesn't meet standards that we would like to see in our classrooms. And so the question is, do we maintain our autonomy and go on our own way, or do we find a way to improve something that's a nagging problem? That students don't seem to know how to do research. And even more than that, it's the problem that the students don't seem to grasp how your discipline works, how it functions. A lot of your discipline is based on the kind of research that's done, the kind of knowledge development that's done. And a lot of students don't grasp what that is or the way it works. They don't, for example, grasp what scholarship as a conversation is about. The fact that Someone will put something forth, publish something or present something, and others will critique it, and there will be a grand discussion and debate that arises around it. And out of that emerges new research and further development. Sometimes ideas get discarded along the way because they just couldn't stand up to the kind of conversation that was going on. But, you know, the whole idea of scholarship as a conversation is a key element that a lot of students just don't grasp. They seem to think, you know, research is done and then it's done. And there it is. And I got this article and that article, and there's no real movement. I've sometimes described this as scholarship is a river rather than a lake. The idea that, you know, the scholarly enterprise isn't like a stagnant lake just sitting there and people keep dumping stuff into the lake. It's like a river. It keeps moving, and it might be the same water, but it takes shape in different ways as the river flows, so that the river today may not be the same as the river yesterday. There are things that have happened and changes that have been made. And sometimes the most assured results of scholarship get thrown aside as, you know, new ways of looking at it come by, and people become convinced that that's a better way of looking at whatever the problem was. And so students don't grasp those sorts of things easily. And they don't get it just by absorbing content. And so the question is one of priorities. How important is it for you to have your students become good researchers? Okay, now I have to cover the material. That's a significant one. We all have a large amount of content that we need to get into somewhat resistant brains. And that's tough. It's tough to, you know, ensure that students actually have the knowledge that you want them to have. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. You have to test student knowledge. You have to sometimes go over previous material and as an introduction to new material. And it all takes time. And I think many of you have probably mapped it out your course sort of class by class. And if you have, bravo, because you know how you're going to get to the end. You know, it's all planned out. I had a professor one time who would teach about, a third to a half of the class in the first 3/4 of the class time, and then would dash through the final stuff because he really hadn't planned how he was going to get all the content in. And it used to be this mad dash at the end to see if we could absorb all the rest of the content, the other half or 2/3 of the content that he hadn't presented. He was a very interesting professor, so it was a nice ride for the first 2/3 to 3/4 of the class, because we'd have all these diversions into interesting discussions, but we never covered the material. And if you're one of those folks, then covering the material becomes even more urgent, because you're never sure whether you're actually going to make it to the end of the time at the same time that you make it to the end of your material. And so it's a problem. But what I've suggested is that probably we don't have to disrupt a lot in order to do this kind of thing. It's possible, for example, to assign some of the content to students outside of class. There's a lot of talk right now about the flipped classroom, where students absorb knowledge outside of class time. Perhaps they view a video lecture or something like that, or they do some reading and they're tested on it. And then class time opens up a little bit more to actual discussion and skill development and that sort of thing. But even if that's not the case, if you are doing that sort of faceted assignment development, you can spend a little bit of time explaining what you want students to do in each part, and then leave them to it, and then devote the rest of the class time to content, so you don't really lose a lot. The methods that I've been suggesting are not really content sapping things. They don't really destroy your plan to work on content. But one thing I think we need to understand is that there are two things in teaching. One is content and one is process. And I think we have often failed to understand that process can be as important as content. Content is the facts of the matter. all the theology that you can give to the student, or, biblical material or psychological theories or whatever. It's the stuff that you are supposed to absorb and learn, and it becomes part of your being. But all of that is surrounded by process, which is the methods by which that knowledge came into being, the kind of discussion that's going on about that knowledge, about how to find where that knowledge is going, how to solve problems within that knowledge base. And all of that is, I think, as important as content. Until students really understand the process around the content, they really don't understand your discipline. They are outsiders. They are looking in, watching content being disseminated to them, but not really understanding how the whole thing works. And they really have to understand how your discipline works if they're going to be properly educated. And so just being an information disseminator is probably not the best way to go. You have to, in some way or other, help students to understand the process. The epistemology of, what's important in the knowledge base is one thing, but the meta-narrative, the culture of the discipline that you work within, how people comport themselves, how they discuss what's important to them, what do they value, what kind of ethics do they follow, etc. And then method. How does knowledge develop in my discipline? How do people present themselves in their writing so that they can convince others? How do people critique other people's writing and make sense of it? And all of that, I think, is very important as well. So that we should see two platforms for your courses, content and process. And they can be intertwined, but it means that process has to have some kind of place within your teaching, even if it's difficult and you have to navigate the content and all of that. Now, not knowing how to teach research. That one, I think, is a bit of a challenge, simply because you are so far past the time when you were learning how to do research that research has become intuitive. If I asked you, how do you drive a car? Think about it for a minute. Well, I get in and I start the car, and I do my mirror checks, and I back up or whatever I need to do to get in position. And then I drive, and I need to know that I'm on the right part of the road. So I have to ensure that I, don't get too close to the line or too close to the edge. And I have to, watch out for pedestrians and bicycles and big trucks. And when you start to break it down like that, it doesn't really seem like driving. It's, because most of what you do in driving is just intuitive. Look in the rearview mirror every 5 seconds. How many of you think about that? It's 5 seconds, got to look in the mirror. And there's another 5 seconds, got to look in the mirror. No, you do stuff. It's intuitive. And the same thing with research. Tell a student, how do you do research? Well, you start with a problem and you find some material, and but the details, it's just not there. And so that's a real problem. It's being able to articulate what is involved in good research is really difficult. And I suggested one way, which is to look at the goals of what a good research project should look like. And then how would I explain how to attain those goals to students in such a way that they understand it? Not saying use critical thinking, but say make your project problem-based and use evidence to try to answer the problem that you have posed. That's critical thinking. Thinking your way through the evidence to solve a problem is what we're talking about. And so not knowing how to teach research is a challenge, simply because we know how to do research so well that explaining it is difficulty. And, talking to my fellow faculty member on Saturday, he really sincerely believes that he doesn't have the language to be able to explain to his students how to improve their research. He just doesn't have that language readily available. And if he does, it might not be articulate to students. And, research of students and the relationship with the professors show that students are very often baffled by instructions on research projects. Somehow we're not getting down to the right kind of level. And so that one is a problem, but we have to see if we can overcome it. And sometimes enlisting the help of librarians may be a way of going. Now, the question that I posed for the third one, which is, the disruption thing, or the fourth one, I don't want to disrupt what I'm doing now. Not wanting to change is, a basic feature of human nature. We are resistant to change, even though we love change when it does, prove to be profitable. You get your new cell phone and you think, oh, wow, I could do all these things. But change in your classroom is a problem. Now, I think we all have seen the situation where faculty don't change anything in their teaching for the last 20 years of their career. And you can see the relevance going downhill, and you can see the motivation going downhill. So it's probably good to be updating and revising our stuff all the time. And I do this constantly with my own teaching. But to disrupt everything that you're doing seems to be a big, big barrier to actually being able to implement teaching research processes. My suggestion is don't disrupt a lot. Work on the research assignment that you have for your course as the primary means by which you teach research processes. And I've suggested some ways that you can do that don't mess you up, don't challenge you too much. One thing that I might suggest as well for teaching research processes without doing a lot of disruption is to do some close reading of key published works in your field, works that can serve as content. In other words, you might take a certain scholar's work, a certain important finding that a scholar has made that's important to the content of your course, and go through a close reading of how the scholar developed those ideas. And look at process more than content. You can look at content, but look at process. How does the scholar present the problem? How does the scholar present evidence? And how does the scholar deal with alternative interpretations? And, how is evidence, checked out as far as its quality and relevance is concerned? Does the scholar ignore certain things? Is the scholar really convincing in the kinds of arguments made with evidence? What sort of conclusions are made, and so on? And doing those sorts of close readings may not be something you've done in your classroom, but I think it's a way that you could combine content, in other words, a key work by a scholar, and process by looking at how a good scholar does research and presents research. And that, I think, is something that could be very helpful. I think the one thing that we have to overcome that may be the biggest problem is this notion that developing student research is peripheral to what we really should be doing, which is presenting our content, presenting our material, presenting our expertise. And I have come to believe more and more that when we make the teaching of research processes peripheral, all we do is make sure that the problem is going to continue. Because learning how to do good research is not like learning how to ride a bicycle. When I was a little kid, my dad got me on a bicycle and he held the back and, ran along with me, and, he steadied me, and all of a sudden, one moment he was steadying me, and the next minute I was riding, and, I looked around and he wasn't there, and I fell off my bike. But my dad encouraged me that, you went 30 feet without me even holding on. You can do this. So I got back on the bike and I rode it. And, I learned how to ride a bike in a day or two. This is not like that. Learning how to do research is much more like learning a new language. And you know very well that learning a new language is not something that you can do by, taking a 1-week crash course. You can learn a few nifty things to say, but that's about all. You can, order a dinner in French or something, but it's not really learning the language. When you're doing research, you're learning how to do something that is highly complex, that keeps changing on you as you change topics and problems. So what worked in this problem doesn't work so well in that problem. Surprise. And you run into barriers along the way. And some topics don't have a lot of material available for them. Others are just brimming with ideas and interpretations. I think of 1 Corinthians 15, where it talks about being baptized for the dead. And that has erupted in dozens of interpretations. And so Catholics and Protestants disagree on it. And among Protestants, they disagree. And among people who are neither Catholic or Protestant, they have other ideas. And so sometimes research is really a big challenge because there's just so much to deal with. And so students navigating this kind of a role really need something more than the traditional one-shot, 1 hour of explanation per student, per program, and then off you go and do research. What they need is consistent and regular instruction in multiple classes through the whole curriculum. In other words, what they really need is for many faculty members to be doing the same thing of breaking down assignments, research assignments, and mentoring students in how to do those assignments well, from the research problem and initial research design, through finding the resources, through using the resources, through writing the research project and citing it properly, whatever your goals are. This needs to be something that is really institution-wide. It doesn't work as well if only one faculty member is doing it, because it takes so much repetition. It takes so much development. It's like a student taking a class in a language every semester. By the end, the student is much more able to speak and read that language than if the student had only taken it in one semester. And so that's something that I think we need to look at very closely and really try to make sense of. Okay, do you have any questions or comments on what I've been doing up to this point? Any questions or comments? I want to take a look at some ways in which we can accomplish this. But those are some of the objections or challenges that I find are often there. Do you have any others that could be a barrier to you as far as being able to do something with this?
Bill, this is Angela, and I just wanted to underscore what you said about changing your teaching year after year. I mean, I've taught some of these courses for over a decade, but I just find it so important for many reasons to change. Well, for example, in novel, I change the novels, and poetry, I change the poetry. Even in human formation, I get different text on like depression or whatever. It just is so important, not only for the factors that you mentioned, but also because I would get bored, and if I get bored, they're going to get bored. And so, if I bring in a novel that I, haven't taught in 10 years or ever, it's just so much more interesting. So
and it keeps you nimble as a professor. You're rising to new challenges, because if you have to teach that new novel, then you have to do some work, and you have to be prepared in the classroom for questions that might challenge you, because material may not be as familiar to you as the old stuff that you had.
And I'll recommend them, like for human formation, I recommend, if I'm not teaching Viktor Frankl's book, I'll recommend it, but so I go back and forth between recommended and required sometimes, but also it gets around the problem too of students just relying on other students who took the course before, to just get information too. So just you have to be a little bit savvy about that as a teacher.
Yeah. And that's why I recommend, starting with the one thing, which is, your research assignment, and rework it, and, make it turn it into one of these faceted things and offer, decide what your goals are going to be and offer students the opportunity to, have it broken down into 4 or 5 parts and all of that. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of work. Probably choosing a new novel would take more work than this would. And I think it can refresh your teaching as well if you do this. And then, thinking of some close readings that you can do in the classroom to show students how good researchers actually do it in your discipline. And the reward, the payoff is that students become more and more disciplinarians like you. They come to be at home in your discipline, to be able to speak the language of your discipline, to be able to think the thoughts of your discipline. And I think that's a tremendously rewarding thing. Teaching people who are aliens and strangers to what you're teaching, you're always trying to bring them along and convince them that this is important to them and that they should be interested in it. Whereas if they really centrally become at home in your discipline, they're going to be much brighter and more alert students in all your teaching, and they're going to enjoy it more, and you're going to enjoy them more. And the rewards are tremendous when students get it, when they understand, oh, this is how it works, and I'm not a stranger here. I feel comfortable in this class. And I've talked to students who feel comfortable in a class, and it's, you can just see a little light in their eyes that, I feel like I'm home here. When I go into Professor so-and-so's class, I feel like I'm coming home. This is stuff that I'm starting to really understand. And the research process part of it is crucial to that. Just being able to say, I know how to do research in this field, and I'm learning more, but it's starting to make sense to me, and I see why you can't use this kind of evidence in this discipline because nobody would accept it. Whereas that kind of evidence that works really well, and so it's great. Any other questions or comments on this?
No, I want to quickly add, Bill, that it's important that to change up, and it's also important to have a steady anchor, if you will, like a steady foundation. So you kind of, these are the core. This is what I want to teach in this course. And you have the, and I apologize for not having my screen. I'm having one of those days today, and I had to eat something, so I apologize. But the core you keep, and you say, this is what I want to teach, and then everything else on the outside, you can say, all right, let's see if we can shift that around a bit. I think that's one way to look at it. I'm not saying I agree with Dr. Angeline totally and you, but I'm just saying I think that's one way of expressing that spice it up a bit thing. Otherwise, like Dr. Angeline says, you can get very bored. That translates to the students.
Yeah,
and they get bored. If you're bored, they're bored. I mean, it's like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, Luigi, that's right, because it depends on the course. Like, for example, intro to psychology. I mean, I really have to teach the same core things. It's different than novel, but in each section every year, I can just come up with different examples or different stories, and that's where you can integrate core and novelty.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been suggesting throughout, is that you don't disrupt your core. You don't upset the whole apple cart and say, I'm going to rewrite this course from scratch. But there are things within the course that can be shifted in such a way that you can make it work without, messing up your main core. And I don't think I'd get very much success if I told you to just, completely abandon what you've been doing and, follow my method. That's not something that I'm interested in doing at all. I'm interested in having you do stuff that you can incorporate with not a ton of effort into your own teaching and have it work. And, if you want to expand upon it the next year, fine, go ahead and, you may spend a couple more sessions talking about research and, how your discipline does research or how you do research and, add to it. But don't throw the whole thing aside. Incorporate good things into what you're doing. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I want to take a look at where we go from here. I've suggested really a grassroots kind of process for this. I am not a big fan of having an academic director suddenly come up with this kind of material and say, okay, faculty members, I'm calling you in to tell you that this is the way we are going to do things from now on. I don't know how many of you are big fans of having your academic director tell you that you are going to disrupt everything you're doing and you're going to do it this way now. But I think for most of us, that develops a lot of resistance. And it also makes the whole process of this kind of alien, because it's not your idea. It wasn't something you came up with or something that you learned about and thought, hey, this might work. I'm going to try it out. It's something that's being dictated to you. So I'm not in favor of that at all. I'm in favor of a grassroots approach, individual faculty shaping the courses, and then maybe discussing what they're doing with their fellow faculty, and beginning to see that there's some interest in maybe this could be something that more of us could do if we can educate and inform our fellow faculty who aren't doing this sort of thing. Maybe we can move up to even the departmental level or something like that. If enough of us get on board, so that we're not dictating to one another, but we're saying this is working for us, and what about it? Maybe we should move this into a higher level. And gradually, academic administration can become involved, but it's not the kind of thing where administration should dictate to the faculty, you are now going to all do this. Instead, it's going to be faculty saying to the administration, we've come up with this and it seems to be working a lot better, and we want you to know about it, and we want you to buy into it and support us in it. And maybe offer us some workshops or something to help us, as you were doing here. And maybe there are ways in which you can enable us to do a better job of this. So I'd rather see it as moving beyond the grassroots into a wider buy-in that is still a buy-in, is still something where most faculty are very interested in doing this. And if some faculty are not interested, they don't see the reason for it, they don't see a value, then probably leave them alone. Let them do what they're going to do, rather than trying to drag them into something that is not going to be theirs, not something that they own. You have to have ownership of this. It has to be something that you want to do, recognizing that the task is really urgent. I am becoming more and more deeply concerned. And I asked the students in the student section how concerned they were about this as well. And they indicated that they're deeply concerned. We are in a world in which the value of problem solving using evidence that we can agree upon is disappearing. The power of opinion and influence and voices that are speaking to us out of Twitter and Facebook is becoming frightening. There is so much that is happening in our world now that is just simply crazy. And your students saw this. They talked about it and how concerned they were, as well as they look at social media and this wild idea and that wild idea, and QAnon is taking over, and politics ideas are floating all around the world that are just crazy. And the whole idea of the authority of grounded evidence from a discipline is disappearing to a large number of people. A large number of people don't understand what a knowledge base in a discipline is all about and how hard won it was to get that knowledge base. The people who sacrificed, who fought to improve our knowledge, to do the research, to expand our ability to understand our particular discipline, and put some solid pieces of data in place that we could build upon in order to get to where we are. And all of that seems to be bypassed by a large proportion of the population who simply don't understand that there is a knowledge base, simply don't understand that there are rules of evidence in every discipline. There are things that you can do and there are things that you can't do. And the one thing you can't do is to say some person that I watched a video on YouTube makes a lot of sense and I'm going to believe him from now on. And, when you figure out who this person on YouTube is, you find that he's a discredited ex-doctor who has been kicked out by his medical society for, radical ideas and doing damage to patients. But now he's a persecuted figure in the mind of many people. And his voice has so much power because he's being persecuted by the establishment. And his evidence is better than everybody else's evidence because he's so convincing. He makes so much sense. And, I look at this world and it is absolutely horrifying to me. I am so concerned about this. And, when you look at religious authority, I should be even more concerned because, our faith is under attack. The authority of scripture, authority of tradition is coming under attack by people who have, new ideas about, religion and what it should be like and what it shouldn't be. And, some of these things in your religion are archaic and we want to get rid of them because we have some new ideas and they have no knowledge base whatsoever, but there they are building an empire in midair. And so it's something that I think is vitally important to us to really be able to enable our students to understand what research is, how to do it effectively, how to do it legitimately. There are rules of evidence, there are methods that disciplines have developed over time. And even if those methods morph over time and, new things come in, all of them are tested by the scholarly conversation. And nothing passes. I look at young scholars and sometimes I feel very badly for them because they try very, very hard to, find a place within scholarship and come up with new ideas. And the established scholars seem to very happy to critique their new ideas and to tell them, everything that's wrong with those new ideas, and they get shot down and the new ideas disappear and they try again and so on. And then eventually they come up with something and the scholars say, hey, right methodology, and you've come up with something that really seems to make sense and the evidence seems to bear it out. And all of a sudden that young scholar has a foot in the door with something that has added to the knowledge base, but it's not easy. And the fact is, it's not supposed to be easy. If you simply accept everything that a young scholar brings into the mix, you're probably going to just end up messing up your knowledge base. Everything has to be tested, and sometimes that testing is really hard ground, and so young scholars can really struggle. But at the end, you've got something of quality because it's been tested, it's been challenged, it's been looked at in great depth, and that's why I sometimes enjoy going to Google Scholar and looking at an article that was published and finding the cited by and having a look at what people have had to say about that article, about its findings. And, some things get challenged more deeply than others, but having students be able to understand how all of this works to make sure that we have an authoritative voice in the midst of a world that is losing its authorities is very important. And if students don't have the ability to do research, they are not educated. Now, I'm pretty adamant about that. If they don't know how to do research well, they are not properly educated. And I think that the lack of student research process ability development is the biggest blind spot in higher education today, bar none. We have simply missed it, that students need to learn research processes and that we need to devote enough time to it through their curriculum to make it like learning another language, make it something that becomes intuitive to them. So I've gone on quite a bit there, but I tend to get on a soapbox when I'm talking about this stuff. It's so important to me. So what are some of the options? One thing that I think you should do is enlist your academic librarian as a consultant. And why is that? Well, one secret of academic librarians is that they see your students in a totally different context than you see them. You see your students in the classroom, you see your students submitting work, you see your students coming for help. But what you don't see your students doing is admitting that they are totally lost and have no idea what they're doing and don't understand the assignment. We regularly get that. Students are too proud very often to tell you that. What will you think of them if they tell you, yeah, I don't have a clue what I'm doing here. But they'll come to a librarian and say, I'm utterly lost. I don't know what to do. And so librarians see that side of students. They see the side of students where they can see where the rough parts are. Where are you lost? And it's often things like creating a research problem, understanding, where to find resources, understanding how the field works, those kinds of things. And so librarians in conversation with you can be very helpful in helping you to see that other side of students that the students often don't show to you. It's not that you're ignorant of them, it's that they don't want to reveal how very lost they sometimes are. Now, some institutions have a teaching and learning director or somebody who's handling teaching or learning, or you've got a writing program, or you've got a writing center where students come for writing help. I would suggest to you that you make some liaisons with those folks because they are dealing with similar kinds of stuff. When I talk to a writing instructor and we start talking about student writing, I find that the same things that I'm seeing in student research, they're seeing in student writing. And they're also very intent on looking at process issues. And so they can be very helpful. As well, to promote the success of anything, when you're trying to move beyond the grassroots, active practitioners who have actually shown that this works are your best resource, your best asset. If you can have faculty who have tried this out and have overcome some of the frustrations, it's working for them, to have them talk to other faculty or even talk to the departmental level and say, here's what I'm doing, and this is really working. I used to get this awful research, and now it's improving. It's getting better, and students seem more interested in their work. Now, do some assessment as well. Take some sample student work from before you try this out, and then, make some comparisons. Is student work really better? And I think it will be. This can be evidence in support of you saying, this is something that really does work. And above all, I would suggest you need to get buy-in from the ground up at your level and the level of your colleagues. This is not something that can be dictated to you. It's something that you have to catch hold of and make use of yourself. And I think most faculty are much more comfortable with assessing something that they may want to try out, trying it out themselves without any kind of coercion and seeing what happens. But I really believe this does work, and I have seen it work. And, in my own classes, as I do this very same thing with faceted instruction, I find that my students start at a certain level and end up at a much higher level and, end up doing stuff they never thought they could do. And, when I see that final research question and outline and bibliography, I look at it and I say, yeah, you've got it. You've figured it out. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And the bibliography is tight and it's centered around the research problem, and you can see how it addresses the various facets of the research problem, and there's primary literature in there, and I go, wow, you've done it, you've caught it. And there it is. Okay. Comments or questions at this point? We're running low of time. We've got less than 10 minutes. And I did want to leave some more time just for whatever you want to say, question on any of this stuff that we've been talking about up to this point. Anyone got anything? You can disagree with me too. I mean, that's fine. You can tell me it wouldn't work for you, and
No,
for some people it might not.
I think.
Yes.
Sorry, Professor. I didn't mean to cut in like.
Oh, no problem.
No, I think you gave us a lot to think about. And as far as agreeing and disagreeing, nobody's ever going to totally agree with everybody, and I mean, that's just the way it is. But I think that the idea of research. I think we're always learning, even ourselves. Those of us who you've written several volumes of these works. Plus the stuff that you have that's the journals and everything else. So you've done a lot of work on this level. Okay, so no one knows this stuff better than you. I mean, certainly. I mean, as far as I know, nobody knows this stuff better than you. So I'm going to go with your lead in terms of suggestions and at least take it into consideration. Like you said, everybody's got to teach the way they have to for themselves.
Yep.
But you can take some of what you say, plug it in. When you said way back at the beginning, you said that Wikipedia, for instance, I remember Father Milady, he wasn't that upset about his students using Wikipedia, but then some of the people in ESL don't want to use Wikipedia. And I'm like, well, you know what? You could use it as a start. Nothing's perfect. None of these sources are perfect, okay? And when they're wrong on some things if you're an expert in the field, so to speak, because not all, we're not completely experts in everything. I mean, there's always much to learn. And the man of wisdom, of which I am not one, but the man of wisdom looks at it and says, hey, listen, there's always so much more to know. There's always so much more to learn. So, I think, what you gave us here in the last 6 weeks is giving us, I think for me personally, it's given us a lot to think about in terms of how we approach our students. And I think everybody here, I can speak for everybody in the school, I think that everybody cares about their students, okay? We all want them to do good. We want them, we bring it to them at the very beginning of the semester. If you need any help, let me know, And sometimes I think you're right. They'll tell the librarian something they won't tell the teacher. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much for everything. Also, I don't want to keep harping on this, but the assignments that were are those the assignments at each at the end of the 6 sections in the here, I'll give you an idea here.
In the platform.
I just lost it again. Here it is. Here's on my iPhone. Challenge, enculturation, design, assignments, formation, promotion. There's like at the end of those sections, right? And then
the third column of each one of them is the exercises that you can do, and just send them in. Send in something related to it. For example, this one as reading and then assess your own openness to develop this. Are you open or not? Readiness of your colleagues. Same for your department. How ready do you think you are? How would you enlist in librarians? And so just some things to think about, and so that you can do that sort of thing, and then just send me a response to it, to the questions you have. And this platform will stay up now indefinitely, so you can just go back to it and use it anytime you want.
Oh, thank you. There's like this. I don't want to go to 6 ones. That's too long. We'll try the 5th one here. It says, how would you enlist librarians into your TRP? Now, I could take some of it from your book, or I could come up with my own idea, right? Put it on Word.
Just come up with some ideas about, where you feel a librarian could fit into whatever you're doing.
Sure.
And the idea is you're always the one in charge. It's your class, and you're in charge. So, as you enlist support, it's got to be, the support that you need. And, librarians don't sort of, bang on your door and say, you must have one session with me, etc. We don't do that, because it's your turf.
I appreciate any help, though. What I want to say is that we could just type it on Word, send it to you by email, right? If you want.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you, Doctor. I
Just
appreciate it.
send it to me in an email, and then you're fine.
Thank you.
So great.
So,
Any other questions? Yes, Christina.
hi, thank you. Just like to jump in here for a second. The parts I find most intriguing about what you discussed today were the parts about context and language, and the fact that each research area has its own context, it has its own language, it has its own way of talking about things. And I'm like, this is probably why I'm so messed up. I think you're right. But I have, I work I'm retired from telecommunications system design. I do have a PhD in theology, thanks be to God. And I have another one in business administration.
Yeah.
And part of the creativity of having all these disciplines and having done research in different areas is that precisely what you described. I mean, the way the research is done and the conclusions that people come to and the difference between qualitative and quantitative processes, how they come up with results, each can inform the other to some degree. And qualitative methods from my business administration studies really are influencing me in how I write about spiritual matters, because I can use the same software tools, if you will, to study the qualitative aspects of St. Teresa of Avila's writings, for example.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm sort of so messed up. It's like, well, what language do I use to present?
Right.
Yeah.
I think you have to understand each of the disciplines well,
Yeah.
and then understand how legitimately you can use something from the business field in theology. Understanding that is what barriers are you to using that in theology, and if there are no real barriers, especially if you're studying someone of the past. You may want to use some of those more social scientific kinds of analyses, and could work quite legitimately. And so, I think it can work without confusion, as long as you don't sort of break the rules of theology as they exist, or break the rules of business as they exist. Interdisciplinary studies happen all the time, and they're not really as much interdisciplinary in the sense of let's all get together and we'll all think the same things. Each of us brings something from the discipline into the other discipline or into a central pool, and we all contribute out of our discipline using our disciplinary expertise. So it's not that anything gets lost of our individual disciplines. It's just that we start sharing, cross-pollinating our ideas with ideas from other disciplines. And sometimes that can end up creating a new discipline, And, I think of social scientific biblical studies, which is a field that's growing now, where, particularly in the New Testament is studied sociologically. And there's some really good insights into development of the early church, for example, and into Paul's letters, etc., from a sociological standpoint. And it happens, and it's not a merging of everything into a pool. It's contributions from various disciplines into one, and that can work really well.
That's really refreshing to hear. And would you say, as you're talking there, it seems like the audience for the research, I realize we're at the end of our hour here, the audience would be really to stay aware of what audience you're writing for any. Yeah. Wouldn't you say that's important?
Yeah.
So, well, all right, great. Thank you so much. This has been a really thought-provoking seminar.
Great. Well, I've really enjoyed this. It's been wonderful being able to do this process. And if any of you have further questions, just email me. My email address is right on that platform. It's Badke, BADKE, at twu.ca, and I'm happy to engage with any of you on anything that you want to talk about. And that's an open invitation. So there we are.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, I think we need someone to pray to close this. I'm not sure how.
I'll do it.
Okay. Oh yeah, Angela's going to do it.
Yeah. Name the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Eternal and omniscient God, we give you thanks for your great glory. Thank you for these sessions, our ability to explore research processes. We pray for Bill, his health and continued teaching in these areas, as well as the well-being of the college and seminary, students, administration, staff, faculty, the writing center, and librarians. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you, Bill, very much.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm just going to close us off at this point and end our session. But stay in touch if you want. And I'm
Take care of
happy to.
yourself.
Great.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, God bless.